Good morning and welcome to this new CTO Talk webinar series. Today is May 29th, 2013, and we'll be talking about HTML5 and the dangers that it represents for our information. My name is Stéphane de Saint-Aubin, and I'll be facilitator today. Most of the talking will be done by our CTO, Renaud Bidoud.
Good morning.
Let me tell you a little bit about the logistics of our call this morning if you're not used to the way we're doing these webinars. We are broadcasting today from Paris. You're muted and will not be able to interact with us by voice. However, we encourage you to ask questions and comments with the chat room that's on the right side of your room. So please do not hesitate at any time. We'll take some time towards the end of the presentation to answer your questions. So the topic today is HTML5, and the status really here is that many of us are starting to realize that this evolution of the famous internet standard is going to create some havoc in our information systems if we are not careful. The standard is not currently fully finalized, and it will be probably in the next year or so. However, most browsers already support HTML5 or what's meant to be in HTML5 with many improvements or so-called improvements that are improving the user experience, but also introducing some new security risks. The challenge really is to understand the situation and be able to adjust the security controls that we put in place and really understand the risk before we can respond to it. And on that purpose, on that comment, I'd like to recommend the reading of Gartner's paper called Prepare to Deal with HTML Security Risks, written in September. Gartner in their, as usual, are sort of looking forward and suggesting that any organization who deals with sensitive data and sensitive applications need to really take a close look at this evolution of HTML and be ready to mitigate the new generation of risks that it encompasses. So on that great advice, let's take a look at the structure of this morning's presentation. Renaud will be talking about describing briefly the new capabilities of HTML5, introducing some of the new concepts in this new version around security, how the threats that we have been used to are likely to evolve to take advantage of these new features, and finally describe sort of a hacker's dream come true with some of those improvements or innovations. We'll get started right away with an introduction about HTML5, but before I let Renaud take over, I'd like to ask you all a few questions about this new standard. So if you would please take a minute to look at these two questions. The first question is, what do you see as positive improvements in HTML5? And you have a few choices here for you to pick. I'll let you pick the one that matches your situation. And then the second question is, how fast do you plan to adopt HTML5? And here again, please give us your opinion on where you stand right now with regards to adoption. All right, so let's take a few minutes to comment these results. Thank you very much for voting. As more people are joining, I'm going to keep the polls open. Renaud, any comments on the answers to the first question?
Obviously HTML5 is necessary for, well, let's say the recent needs in terms of interactivity between the user and the application. And let's say the vote is quite clear about that. So that's what, let's say, that's a key point, and that's the reason why people, I think, want to move to HTML5.
On the second question, it seems that everyone is looking at this a little bit cautiously.
It seems that there's no will to move to HTML5 for all the applications, just taking advantage of, well, probably the dynamic content and when the functional requirements for the application are met by the standard.
All right. Okay, so thank you very much for your vote here. We are going deep now into the situation with Renaud.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. A very, very short introduction to HTML5 and its history. So first, of course, it's a project which is led by the W3C. And what is very interesting is that we've got the last drive at the beginning of the month. It's now called version 5.1. The previous one was last year, and it's, since 2008, we already had 13 drafts. So that's quite interesting. It means that the standard has been evolving a lot in 5 years. So it's not something which is very recent, and that's one of the problems we will see we have to deal with. Why HTML5? Let's say at least the purpose as it's defined is, first of all, to have now the HTML content which is dynamic, which was obviously not the case in version 4. Also the support for offline mode, that's quite interesting and important for our cloud-based application. We want to be able to increase security control and tuning. That's something we'll see which is kind of tricky, and we have to take it very seriously. And also improving the internals. That's mainly for performances and also communication between the client and the server and so on. So a lot of improvements which are brought by HTML5. The first point is about the content. This content evolved, and first we can support graphics natively thanks to the canvas tag. So it's new tag, and now you can create your own graphics without importing images. Also the native support for most of the common audio formats, which are now integrated into browsers. We've got exactly the same with video. That's normal, I would say, today. You cannot imagine a page without video or sound. Quite surprising, I would say, it's a drag and drop capability. Thanks to new attributes and event handlers, you can now entirely handle the drag and drop operations into an HTML page. And that's a small one, but also quite interesting and maybe surprising in some cases. Its capability to geolocate the source, let's say the client. So there are also some improvement in terms of inputs. When you ask a user to enter for an email or URL, so they define new types. So the first one is for entering an email. We've got the URL, we've got numbers, and we can just specify that we want a number, or we can specify we want a range of number. That's also interesting because it's entirely embedded into the standard. Also different types of dates that you can specify. And one of the key points is that HTML5 natively embeds a format validator. So it's based on the type, which is defined. So if you want a URL, you have to enter a valid URL. You can also create your own pattern. So it's based on a regular expression. But, and we will see that's an issue with most of the new HTML5 features, is that this can be disabled. So it's kind of surprising because you specify a new type, you want input validation, but you can still disable it. So, well, I don't know why it's been defined, but well, let's say it's here. A few examples. You see on the top left form with, well, different kind of user inputs which are defined. And the point is that, as you can see on the right, you've got the code which is related to these input fields. So you've got the code for an email, you've got the code for a URL, you've got code for a range of numbers. And on the left, interesting also, the definition of a pattern. So this pattern, which is, well, D4, specifies that we want just 4 digits. And each time, you see, I entered an, well, invalid format, and I've got the error message. Well, that's interesting, but be careful, because this is something which remains client-side. Client-side means that it's not a security feature. It's only for, well, let's say, functional, to make it easier, whatever, but there are many, many ways to bypass this kind of check, of course. Well, just create your own request, and then you send it as you want to the server. Now, also, some new internals. Well, the first one is the notion of what we call the web workers. This makes it possible to have some JavaScript processes working in the background of the application. So it means that there is no impact on the user experience, no delay in display of the page or whatever. So that's kind of interesting because, of course, more and more we have to process some data on the client side, so with JavaScript, and you cannot wait for data to be processed before you display the rest of the page. Also a notion of web storage. So let's say the purpose was to enrich the HTML4 storage, which was limited to cookies. So now we have different kind of storage. We have an internal database. We've got, well, what they just call local storage, which is a replacement of the cookies, but much more powerful. So many ways to store some user data or user-related data on the client side. Also the web app cache. So this is to enable the offline mode, which means that a page, its data, its content will be entirely stored onto an application, and if the application, well, onto the client, sorry, and if the client appears to be offline, then the content will be served. So it's completely different from the caching mechanism of HTML4. We'll have a look at this a little bit later. Also, we have improvement into communications. We've got WebSockets and also what we call the SAC, server-side events. This makes it possible to establish a bidirectional connection between the client and the server. Well, in previous versions, all the data were sent from the client to the server. And so we had to do some kind of polling in some cases to have, let's say, dynamic-like content, but it was only monodirectional. Now we've got a fully bidirectional communication between the two components of the communication. So, well, HTML5 well, will bring some tricks in terms of security.